Direct News TV. September 7, 2023. Russia-Ukraine war updates, no sign of intentional attack on Romania, NATO. Foreign Relations Chair questions top 3 oil companies on Russia business. The head of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee has asked the country's top 3 oilfield services companies to explain why they continued doing business in Russia after its invasion of Ukraine, and demanded that they commit to cease all investments in Russia's fossil fuel infrastructure. Senator Bob Menendez, a Democrat from New Jersey, cited an Associated Press report that the companies, SLB, Baker Hughes and Halliburton, helped keep Russian oil flowing even as sanctions targeted the Russian war effort. There's no evidence the firms violated sanctions by continuing to send equipment to Russia. Halliburton quit Russia less than 6 months after the invasion, while Baker Hughes sold its oilfield services business in Russia about 9 months after. SLB announced it would stop exporting technology to Russia in July, 2 days after the AP sought final comment for its first report. A look at the depleted uranium munitions the U.S. is sending to Ukraine. The United States has announced plans to supply Ukraine with depleted uranium munitions to stave off the Russian military's offensive, drawing fierce condemnation from Moscow. The planned transfer, which comes as part of a $1 billion U.S. aid package for Kyiv unveiled on Wednesday, also has raised questions about the possible effects depleted uranium could have on civilians in Ukraine. UN actively engaged in guarantees to bring Moscow back to Black Sea grain deal. The United Nations is actively engaged in trying to improve Russia's grain and fertilizer exports in a bid to convince Moscow to again allow the safe Black Sea export of Ukraine grain, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has said. "We believe that it's necessary to create a system of mutual guarantee," Guterres told reporters on Thursday on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Jakarta. "Guarantee that the Russian Federation is able, indeed, to overcome difficulties that still exist, even if many have been solved and, at the same time, guarantees that we will have the restoration of the Black Sea Initiative," he said. Guterres last week sent Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov a set of concrete proposals aimed at reviving the Black Sea grain deal, which Russia quit in July, a year after it was brokered by the United Nations and Turkey. Ukrainian drone targets Russia's Bryansk region, Governor. A Ukrainian drone targeted an industrial site in the Bryansk region in southern Russia, the governor has said, setting an administrative building on fire but causing no injuries. Alexander Bogomaz, writing on the Telegram messaging app on Thursday, said emergency services had been dispatched to the scene in the city of Bryansk. North Korea-Russia military support exchange a huge mistake, U.S. VP. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has said it would be a huge mistake for North Korea to exchange military support with Russia for use in its war against Ukraine. Harris, who is in Jakarta, Indonesia for an ASEAN summit, told CBS News in an interview broadcast on Thursday that it would be a sign of desperation for Russia to seek aid from the reclusive North Korea and it would further isolate both countries. "I think it would be a huge mistake. The idea that they would be supplying ammunition to that end would be a huge mistake. I also believe very strongly that for both Russia and North Korea, this will further isolate them," Harris said. U.S. officials have warned in recent days that arms negotiations between Russia and North Korea are actively advancing, while a report said North Korea's Kim Jong-un plans to travel to Russia this month to meet President Vladimir Putin and discuss supplying Moscow with weapons for its war effort. Ukraine prepares for second winter of Russian attacks. Ukrainian air defense crews are banking on newer and better weapons systems to help prevent their country being plunged into darkness again in a second winter of Russian missile and drone attacks. Nearly half of Ukraine's energy system was damaged by Russian attacks last winter, when Moscow pummeled power plants and transformers with cruise missiles and Iranian-made Shahid drones. At times, millions of people had no electricity. The threat of attacks on the power grid remains acute following reports that Moscow has set up its own facilities to manufacture assault drones based on the Shahid 136. But most of last winter's damage has been repaired and Kiev has bolstered its air defenses, including with newly donated German-made Gepard systems, sleek green turrets mounted onto the chassis of a battle tank. The military says one such system has shot down 5 Shahids since its first use a month ago, a 100% success rate. We understand that the enemy has not quit his criminal intentions to hit critical infrastructure facilities and cause damage to Ukraine and its economy, General Serhiy Naiv, commander of the Joint Forces of the Armed Forces, told Reuters in the northern region of Zhytomyr. We had fewer systems last winter. Now we have been given more, and the effectiveness will be better, he said. Lavrov assures Bangladesh Moscow to complete nuclear power project on time. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has assured Bangladesh that Moscow was committed to completing a nuclear power project on time, despite obstacles resulting from Western sanctions over the war in Ukraine. Lavrov, the first Russian foreign minister to visit Bangladesh since its independence in 1971, reached Dhaka late on Thursday for a 2-day visit after attending the East Asia Summit in Jakarta. Bangladesh's Foreign Minister A.K. Abdul Momin took up the issue of timely completion of the nuclear power project and bilateral trade issues with Lavrov, who also offered the export of liquefied natural gas, LNG, to meet Dhaka's energy needs, officials said. Our flagship joint project is the construction of the Rupar nuclear power plant on the territory of Bangladesh, Lavrov said. The project is progressing smoothly in line with the schedule, and delivery and charging of first nuclear fuel are expected as early as in October, Lavrov said after the meeting. Bangladesh is building the first of 2 nuclear power plants in collaboration with Russian state-owned atomic company Rosatom in a $12.65 billion project, 90% of which is financed through a Russian loan repayable within 28 years with a 10-year grace period. Russian businessman with ties to Kremlin sentenced in U.S. A Russian businessman with ties to the Kremlin has been sentenced to 9 years in a U.S. prison after being convicted of participating in a $93 million insider trading scheme involving hacked secret earnings information about multiple companies. Vladislav Klyashin, the owner of a Moscow-based information technology company called M13 that did work for the Russian government, was sentenced on Thursday by U.S. District Judge Patty Saris in Boston after a jury found him guilty in February. Hackers from 2018 to 2020 viewed and downloaded yet-to-be-announced earnings reports for hundreds of companies including Tesla and Microsoft, which Klyashin and others used to trade before the news was public, according to prosecutors. Klyashin, 42, is one of the highest-profile Russians in U.S. custody. And while his case predated the Russian invasion of Ukraine last year ordered by President Vladimir Putin, Klyashin's connections to the Kremlin have long intrigued American authorities. Klyashin individually netted more than $34 million in the scheme, prosecutors said. The judge on Thursday ordered Klyashin to forfeit that money, though she suggested it was unlikely most of it would ever be collected. Sunak to discuss circumventing Russia's Black Sea grain blockade at G20. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will discuss progress toward circumventing Russia's Black Sea grain blockade with G20 leaders at a summit this weekend, his spokesperson has said after a call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. They discussed the impact of Putin's continued Black Sea grain blockade, the spokesperson told reporters on Thursday in a readout of a call between Sunak and Zelensky. The Prime Minister committed to galvanize progress with G20 countries on circumventing Russia's blockade, and ensuring vulnerable countries can access vital grain shipments. Europe switched to renewables, a hit to Russian attempts to weaponize energy, Kerry. Europe is making itself stronger against Russian attempts to weaponize energy by switching to clean sources faster, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry has said. Kerry also said on Thursday that countries like Romania and Bulgaria could use natural gas in their transition, provided steps were made to capture emissions from new developments, warning against self-destructive choices that would amplify the climate crisis. Fossil fuels produced just 33% of the European Union's power in the first half of this year as the bloc fights climate change and ends dependence on Russian fossil fuels. One of the solutions to the challenge of someone like President Vladimir Putin is to more rapidly effect the energy transition, Kerry told the Reuters news agency in an interview in the Romanian capital Bucharest after a 3-Seas summit of EU states. Europe has done a pretty good job. With Ukraine war on G20 agenda, Kremlin says Putin won't make video address at summit. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not planning to make a video address at the upcoming G20 summit in New Delhi this weekend, the Kremlin has said. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.